So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Playmakers webinar. My name's Justin Flitter. I'm the Community Ambassador for Playmakers and the CMO for Playbooks. And today we have the wonderful Jody Boshoff from Launch PR. How are you, Jody?
Kia ora, everybody. So good to be here. Thanks, Justin.
So we've known each other for a few years now, back to when you were marketing and comms for a digital humans company called FaceMe, which is now Unique. And so I was interested, and I've seen a lot of your work, and we've done a lot of things together with around artificial intelligence conferences over the last few years. But as we get into this webinar around PR on a shoestring budget and how to get those quick wins and tell your story better, I'm just keen to get a little bit of your background. So perhaps before FaceMe, where were you? How did you get into running marketing and comms programs for different companies?
Yeah, so Justin, I've spent 20 years in journalism, but on many different sides of the table. So behind the table, I was journalist for some tech publications and women's publications. So that was interesting, worked in busy newsrooms. And then I moved to the other side of the table and started out in corporate comms. So I was that person pitching to journalists, hoping to get a yes. I then moved over to beautiful New Zealand 5 years ago and managed the global PR for an engineering company, and moved into startup land, where I really learned some priceless lessons at the coalface and got to do a lot of pitching for New Zealand's biggest companies and a lot of startups co-pitching, and loved it. And that was how I got into storytelling.
So your work's not just kind of selling stories and getting that coverage in New Zealand, but certainly internationally as well.
Yes, so I've worked specifically in South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and America. It's totally wrecked my sleep cycles. I'm no stranger to waking up at 4 a.m. to catch the American news cycle, or in the evening the South African news cycle. But it has been really interesting. The news cycle is different wherever you go. And it's been really great to specifically help some New Zealand startups scale into the US, which is a really vast media landscape.
Yeah, and it's a lot more complicated. And I guess one of the themes for this webinar was, that you don't need a 10 grand a month retainer to do it. And I certainly know, from my experience working with a New Zealand company trying to build a PR program into the States. We had a PR company on retainer over there for 10,000 US a month.
Been there, done that, and got no coverage.
We had some fantastic lunches, and we got to pitch our story to a number of different journalists, but perhaps we didn't get the wins we were after. And so that's where I'm enthusiastic and super keen to hear what you're going to be able to share with us today. So there's a lot of time and effort that goes into building a PR program and pitching. And I guess, so what are the kind of the three different types of media and ways of pitching to get your story out there?
Yeah, so you get what's called earned coverage, and that's the kind that is the holy grail of startup land, right? You want to be in the NZ Herald, you want to be in stuff, and that you don't have to pay for. So to get that kind of coverage, you really need your news to be relevant, relatable. You need a news hook. Another kind of coverage you get is paid. So you get Newswire services, and they just have content partnerships, and you pay for them to basically do a spray and pray. The content gets indexed online. It's not usually in high value publications. And then, of course, you've got your usual platforms that you own, right? So that's LinkedIn, website. What we'll focus on today is very much in that earned space. Startups don't usually have a very big platform on Facebook. They don't have the followers. They don't have the followers on LinkedIn. So, putting out a press release there it's okay. But to really get eyes on your content, you need to be focusing on getting those yeses from, the NZ Heralds, the spin-offs. That is where your audience is, and that's where you want to be.
So if you're running a small business, perhaps you're a small business owner or an advisor to a growing business, when's a good time to start building that PR program? What are some of the moments in your company history or things that are going to happen where you're likely to kind of go, we need to get our story out there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I get asked that one a lot. So journalists like proof points. It's not enough to have an idea, and I always tell people your product is never the story. So in terms of proof points, they're looking for, have you got an investor? Is there at least an MVP that I can go and look at? Have you signed up a real live client? So there needs to be a milestone that you go out and announce. I say the product is never the story. Yes, you're pitching your product, but it's really about how that product is changing people's lives. What you're gonna do through your product. Journalists are the same as you. They want eyes on their content. In fact, nowadays journalists actually get appraised on how many people read your stories. So they're not going to publish rubbish. So there is a need to substantiate whatever you send through with proof points. I've done a lot of pitching, and journalists will push delete if you're announcing a product launch.
So that means you've really got to sit back and think about what that particular angle, what's that nugget that you've got, that hook that's your
You
there.
need your news hook, right? You need your news hook. I'm sure Justin won't mind me mentioning playbooks, but I said that news needs to be three things. It needs to be relevant, relatable, and you need your news hook. So playbooks does meetings. Meetings are relevant, relatable. We all go to them every day, all day. The news hook, not there yet, right? So the news, recently you guys hosted this incredible, massive, large town hall where you announced, future of meetings, integrations. That's awesome. It's an Apple style launch. Kiwis don't usually do huge town halls. It's ballsy. It's amazing. And then you're bringing sexy back to meetings. So when we sent that to a journalist, they stood up and went, oh, it's not just meetings. Another really bad example, I told myself I wouldn't mention it, but I'm going to because it's simple. During COVID, toilet paper made the news, right? Why? It's relatable because we all buy it. It's relevant. We were buying it because there was a shortage. But what was the news hook? It's running out on the back of COVID. There's this urgency. People are buying, out of panic. So you need the hook. You need the punch for the journalist to read that and go, oh, that sounds interesting. Another top tip is they read two sentences. Don't attach a press release. Most times when a customer sends me a press release, I copy, paste it into the body of the email, summarize it at the top. You've got about 10 seconds with journalists, so you need something to hook them in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess you mentioned a number of news sites now, and certainly across the world, many of the daily papers that we once, picked up on the sidewalk and read at a cafe are now online and often behind a paywall. What's the perception about having your news story about your product and how it's going to change the world sitting behind a paywall? Is there some anxiety around that?
There is a lot of anxiety, especially when it comes to platforms like the NBR, like the Herald Tech section, even Business Desk. I'd say 50% of clients that I help now are going to get a hit, and that is content behind a paywall. There's a perception that to access really valuable content, sometimes you need to pay a premium. So it's working. Readers are definitely reading what's behind the paywall. The subscription model wouldn't work without it. The advertising model wouldn't work without it. It doesn't mean you can't share that article. So I advise people, if they do get a gated hit, is take your favorite 3 quotes in there, schedule them for social and acknowledge and tag. So tag the NBR, say, really appreciate the awesome coverage. Favorite highlight, and share the quote and then link back to that article. That's a really good way of still getting value from the content. You can print it off for shareholders. It's not, I've done that before. It's not like you're sharing it broadly or for commercial purposes, but it definitely is highly valuable to get a hit behind gated content. Another thing to remember is they often remove it. So they'll often, a couple of weeks later, to boost readership, take it out from behind that paywall.
Mm. And I mean, subscription numbers are pretty high, right? So it's not like no one's subscribing to the paywall. Actually, when you look at, most of the, the online news sites, their subscription numbers are pretty staggering. So you're absolutely going to get
this, the advertising model wouldn't work without real metrics. The typical business read is the NBR, and there's a bit of status, sitting on the commute reading the NBR, which you paid for. It's like the London Times of New Zealand. So definitely very, very valuable getting in there.
And one thing you mentioned in our call the other day was thank the journalist.
Thank the journalist. These are people and they work hard, and thousands of emails come in at them. And what we very often do is we'll share the article without thanking the journalist. They don't see you've shared it unless you tag them or thank them. So every single story that a customer of mine gets out there, I'll go back to the journalist and I'll thank them. Corrections, talking about going back to the journalist. Can you go back for corrections? I've often asked that. If it's something small and it's not factual, and it's, let it slide. They're really busy. If it's factual, I say, let's go back and correct it.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure that the key points are right. So it's easy for someone to slip up or get something slightly wrong. So it's quite good to be able to go back there and make that change, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's really good to give a journalist as much information as possible, but in a succinct, bulleted format. They're churning out 3 to 5 articles a day. There's pressure on them in the newsroom. So the easier you can make their lives, the better. I often draft up exclusive quotes, or I'll tell them, hey, if you want to speak to our customer, give me the questions. I'll go get the answers for you. I'll bring them back to you, and I'll make it easy for you to write your story.
Okay, I got a couple of good questions coming up for you now. When you've decided you want to start doing a PR program, what should you be preparing content-wise that you need to have for every pitch? What should you have that you're going to attach to every email about your company, about your people?
I'm always surprised at how many startups have not written their about content. So when I say, could I have your boilerplate text or your about content, they go, what's that? So you definitely need your about content sorted, but that goes at the bottom of the email. That is secondary to what you're attaching at the top, which is a 1 to 2 paragraph pitch, which is your hook. That's telling the journalist why they should sit up and why they should take note and why they should give you a yes. Very seldom will a journalist take your media release and publish it as is, unless you're paying for a newswire. So what you should see your media release is here's full background, but what you're wanting to put in the email is why it's important, why it matters, full details attached. They'll go away and they'll write their own story. So very seldom do you have to spend hours and hours on a 2-page press release. Doesn't matter to them. The hook matters. They're going to write their own content anyway.
What about making sure that you've got, the right photos together?
Yeah, that's it.
That sort of thing, because it's always good to have a photo as part of it, especially if you're showcasing your CEO or a new hire or product or things like that, even if it's just for the journalist to see some things, right?
Totally. So names are important. New hires are important. Don't attach a massive photograph to your email. It will probably go into spam. If you do attach a photograph, low res, shrink it down, put it in the background document, unless it's someone really famous. But journalists are less concerned about the media that you're attaching and more concerned in the angle. In the first instance, they can ask you for more. They can say, yes, I'd like a chat. That is your invitation to go. And here is more. And after the interview, go. And if you want background, here's product pics. Don't send that in the first instance. They're literally reading the first paragraph and going yes or no.
All right, so you've got your pitch together. You think you've got the hook, and it's Thursday afternoon. Are you going to pitch?
No, never a Thursday. Hang on.
I want to get it in the Saturday paper.
Any journalist looks at their calendar on a Monday, plans their news cycle. They've got deadlines. Often the deadline is a Friday. They want to get out of the office tomorrow. So if you give me a story today, I'm not putting in any more effort. I've tried to do my writing in advance. Never pitch on a Thursday. Monday to Wednesday, preferably a Monday. There is such a thing called an embargo. Maybe I should quickly cover that up. So that is when you want to send out your pitch to many, many people because it's big news. You've landed IBM as a customer. You've been acquired, whatever it is. You're going to send out to many publications your news release, and you're going to say, it is embargoed. You can go live with your story, and that should always be a Monday. That gives them time to write, and it gives them time to break news. And an embargo is a really good idea, and it's a good idea for a Monday. Another thing to mention, Justin, is if you're not doing an embargo, which is sending your release to many people, try and give the journalist an exclusive. They are more likely to say yes if you say, you're the only one we're giving this to. You get to break the news. Don't send it to 10 or 20 journalists, and especially don't CC all the journalists in the same email. I've seen it before. You laugh. I've seen it before. It will get deleted, and you'll probably get blacklisted as well.
All these things we need to keep on top of our minds. So what are some of the examples that you've got?
Examples, I've written down 3 cheeky examples to share. I was once working for an engineering company who wanted me to pitch in around tunnel engineering. Yes, tunnel engineering. Yawn. It wasn't exciting. Elon Musk, I noticed, had recently gone out with some commentary around underground roads and that he thought this was the future of travel. So piggyback media is when you take the topic of the day and you jump on that. So what we did was we said, here's official commentary on whether we think these underground roads are possible from an engineering perspective. Man, it got picked up. It got TV, it got radio, it got plastered everywhere. Because suddenly someone is calling Elon Musk out and evaluating whether the statement is correct or not. That was awesome. So that's an example of piggyback media, a bit cheeky. You can do that with anyone and anything. You don't need permission. Second one, I know that there'll be a lot of founders that spend a lot of money on going to conferences. It's expensive. It's time out of your day. Often you'll get, if you pay to go to a conference, you'll get a media list of the media attending. You won't get their email addresses, but you'll get a good sense of the media attending. So what I usually do is I do a heck of a lot of desktop research. I get all the addresses together, so it takes a couple of hours, and I'll email them ahead of the time, a cheeky pitch, and I'll say to them, do you want to meet up at the conference? This is going to be a major theme. Taken a step further, I will find the media area at a conference. So at Money 2020, I snuck in with 100 Kit Kats. And I was working for the AI company who produced these digital assistants. And I said, well, you could take a break and eat a Kit Kat if you had a digital assistant who was helping you. I attached a little memory disk with a story on and a memory stick, and I left my number. I got 2 amazing hits out of that. So sometimes being cheeky is a good thing. Another thing is, don't be afraid to suggest to journalists what they should be covering. So I sat next to the LinkedIn finance editor at one conference, and I turned to him and I said, Devin, I think you should do, a thematic on this. And these are the 3 key takeaways. He goes, I don't have time. I said, I'll write it for you. So I sent it to him, and I walked around the conference area getting commentary, and I literally did his job for him. And it was a fantastic piece. But be cheeky. After each day at the conference, write up commentary, send it out, make their job easy.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's having a bit of hustle and being creative and thinking about how are you going to work the room, work the conversations, and thinking about how a particular journalist or a publication would want that framed up for their audience, and then be able to craft it in the right way, right?
Yeah, and again, they're people. So if you're pitching to Justin, make sure that you've gone and Googled Justin. What does he like writing about? What does he write about well? What is the special interest of his? You can't pitch to someone if you haven't gone and done your background research.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the other kind of key tips or tricks, any other tips or tricks that you want to add that you've seen companies do badly or do really well over the last few years?
Yeah, so what I would like to encourage everyone with is you don't get coverage as a result of a favor. So if you're paying an agency, they're not getting you coverage because the journalist owes them anything. They're getting coverage because of the story. So storytelling is for everyone. There's no secret email list that I have. Everyone who I'm pitching to, their contacts are on the internet. There's no little black book. Usually you can pitch. If you can Google, you can pitch. You can go and get those email addresses. So give it a bash. Do get someone to read over your pitch. You'd be surprised when we believe in what we're pitching about, how arrogant we can sound, or we can forget things that others see. So yes, get some second opinions, but it's for everyone. Storytelling is for everyone. Pitching is for everyone.
So many companies or CEOs will feel like they've got a great hook and they've got a great pitch. Is it something, as you're saying, that you can do yourself? When's a good idea to bring someone like you into the mix?
It's when you've got news. So I launch PR. We don't do retainers. I like to work with people when they've got news because I'm working with startups. Yes, I could sign you up on a very big retainer, but I don't know you have news next month. You're not an Amazon, you're not an IBM. So a good time to work with a PR agency is when you have news, when you have an announcement, and be very specific around the outcomes. So what are your tier ones? If you don't think Scoop is a tier one, be sure to say that. This is what we expect. These are our top 5. I'd like to get into one of them. You don't need help with everything either. If you've got someone on your team who's really good at writing, you could negotiate down and say, hey, we'll do the press release writing if you can refine it. We'll do the research around, data points to include. So play to your strengths, and that can really help bring the price and the cost of PR down. But definitely involve an agency when you have news. You don't have to, sign up an ongoing retainer when you don't have news.
Mm. So what do you do when you've got your pitch ready and you're ready to go, and Apple does a big release?
That often happens. So the small guy gets delayed because there's been a big story. You hang tight. You don't nag the journalist. We had that happen the other day. I had a customer. We thought we were going live with the story on a Friday. I think Apple released some sort of a tags, those geolocation tags, and it was bigger news than what we had going on. But I held tight. I contacted the journalist on Monday and I said, great story on Apple. Remember the little guy, it's Monday, you're planning your news cycle. Another thing to remember is when you don't have news, you can still use those channels that are owned. So you can still put out some thought leadership on LinkedIn. You can still put up your blog posts and share those. So don't discount that as well as a way of getting ongoing momentum.
Awesome. Oh, well, look, thank you so much for joining us today, Jody. It's been hugely interesting, as always, to get your insights into how to run a PR program. And I'm sure what you've had to share today will be hugely beneficial to advisors and business owners around the country. So we really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you for joining us for this PlayMakers webinar. We look forward to seeing you at the next episode. See you, everyone. Thanks, Jody.